Hi there. Today we're trying something different, something new. We're broadcasting on YouTube, but we're listening to you on LinkedIn. Why? Because the Vice President of the European Commission, Maroš Šefčovič, is here with us in the studio in order to crowdsource your best suggestions on how the EU can trigger more innovation, especially in the field of clean tech. The best ideas will be presented tomorrow by the Vice President at the Clean Energy Industrial Forum, which we'll talk about in a minute. So if you would like to pitch your suggestions, please visit the LinkedIn page of Vice President Maroš Šefčovič and add your ideas in the comments under this video. We'll go over them, as many as we can during this broadcast, and try to discuss them here in the studio. We received quite a lot over the past few days, and we'll try to bring those as well. Before we start the conversation, let me also introduce the three panelists and guests that we have here in our studio. The first one is Professor Damian Dalton from Ireland. You're the CEO of Beeyon. Next to you is Emma Woxlin from Sweden. You're the co-founder of Epishine. And next to me, Juraj Ulehla from Slovakia, co-founder and managing partner of Voltia. Yeah. So the way it's going to work is that we're going to try to crowdsource, as I just said, the best ideas that come from our LinkedIn community, but you will get a chance also to try to suggest to the Vice President what you would do if you were in his position. But let me start with you, Vice President. Thank you for being here with us. I have a confession to make. We're squatting your LinkedIn page right now because we're broadcasting from there. Because you have a community of 340,000 followers, we thought it would be an interesting place to start to transmit this conversation from. But I'd like to ask you about the timing that we're having this conversation. I'd like to ask you about this forum. Why is it so important for you? And what are you hoping to get out of this exercise? What kind of ideas would be useful for you and how would you use them?
No, thank you very much. And at first, I would like to thank our guests that are ready to talk about this very important topic with us. And I hope that the LinkedIn community will also bring some of innovative ideas, because I'm on that page very often and I see that I get a lot of very good suggestions from the LinkedIn community. So why today and why on this topic? Tomorrow, we are actually launching our first edition of the Clean Energy Industrial Forum, because it was quite obvious that if you want to remain leader in the clean tech, in renewables technology, we have to get our business leaders together with the mayors, which will happen for the first time tomorrow, with the policymakers, and really to share what they believe we should do together as Europeans. And I am traveling across the Europe a lot, and I'm always impressed what we have in Europe, in our labs, what kind of innovation ecosystems we can build, what we have in our universities. And I'm glad that we have such a young co-founder of a very innovative company with us. And therefore, I think that we have to showcase more, we have to network more, and we have to find the recipes how to get these great ideas from the innovation lab into the practice, and really to use and build the technology here, not in Silicon Valley or somewhere else, but here in Europe. And therefore, I'm very glad that we can have this chance to crowdsource the base ideas, how we can accomplish that in Europe.
Okay, so before you take the floor and you make the suggestions, let us learn a little bit about who you are and where you came from. Damian, you're from Ireland. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about who you are and what is Beeyon, your company.
Okay, thanks very much. Beeyon is a company that's working in the data center energy management field. Believe it or not, data centers, despite the fact that the dynamo of the cloud are great in terms of state-of-the-art for servers and communications, but when it comes to energy management, they're really very inefficient. So our technology enables you to analyze your data center in terms of physical attributes, such as kilowatts, but also in terms of business objects, and identify energy-saving actions, so that you can cut down your CapEx and OpEx costs by maybe 30%, and that also impacts your environmental impact.
So it's energy efficiency in the field of data centers.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Emma, I will not ask you how old you are. I would never ask a lady, but how old were you when you started? Because something in my math doesn't make sense, and I feel like I didn't do anything in my life when I look at someone like you, who is a co-founder.
We started working at Epishine 2-3 years ago, and I was 24 at the time. Yes.
Okay, that's quite impressive.
That's jealous that he doesn't have his own company.
The researchers started to work on the innovation behind Epishine before I was born.
Okay.
So
the research started before, but you co-founded this company.
Exactly.
So what is Epishine?
We're developing a new kind of solar cell with new materials and a new way of manufacturing them. So we have been focusing on excluding all toxic and rare materials from the solar cells. So they're made only from organic materials. They look like this. We have also developed an extremely simple and extremely scalable manufacturing process to print them.
Okay, sounds good. And Juraj, last but not least, on my right, Tell us about Voltia.
Yeah. Actually, I started personally as a banker, and after 10 years working in a bank, I switched to become an entrepreneur. So that was really a big challenge. We started with the photovoltaic industry back to 2008. Really, that was good time for uptake and so on. And back to 2011, we started 2 companies, 2 another startups in e-mobility. One of those is Voltia, second one is Greenway, both doing very well and speeding up the pace. What is Voltia doing? We are helping to switch to electric either big fleets or even personal customers. We help to integrate electric vehicles into the normal business life of the companies. This is what we do.
So if you allow me to simplify, we have energy efficiency, we have renewables, we have electric...
E-mobility.
Yeah, e-mobility. Do you want to start maybe with pitching your first policy idea to the Vice President? Who wants to go first? Maybe we'll start with Emma if you're ready.
I can start with a challenging one, maybe. So I would like the EU to help us enter into the large corporations in Sweden. Some of them still have a not invented here mindset. And one way I was thinking you can do this is like, for example, when the big car companies were cheating when it comes to the Euro 6 regulations, you give them penalties, like money penalties and even prison, which will not really help the environment. So my suggestion is that you could instead give them like a list of startups or SMEs working with innovations or solutions that could help them meet the regulations and like demand them to cooperate and work with us.
Yeah, if you want to...
Yeah, I thank you very much for that ideas, because I think especially on that suggestion who can help them or bring the innovation to the big companies is actually the very good idea, which I also heard yesterday when we've been preparing for our batteries meeting on Friday, that how to make this matchmaking between those who are ready to invest in production line of the batteries and where they would have a demand. Would the car manufacturers, would the construction industry be interested in how much of the batteries they would need? So they've been asking for some kind of matchmaking platform, and this is probably another idea where we have to think how to really make sure that these good ideas are not lost, are not traveling across the ocean, but are proposed to the European companies who would have then better information what is available here in Europe and how to get in touch with you. And second idea, what you suggested, is true that we in Europe have a big problem to move the product from the innovation lab into the market. And what I hear from the innovative community, that this is this loans or financing between 2 to 5 million to get you through so-called Death Valley to make it to actually scaling up the production. And we are thinking now how we can adjust our financial instruments so that would be much more simpler for use, because I know that very often our innovators are scared to go through all the administrative process because it's very cumbersome. So I fully understand your point, and we will try to think how we can use that great idea.
Gentlemen, if you allow me, before I let you pitch, I want to also bring on board our online audience. Sure. So I have my first question from Aurélie Beauvais. She works for Solar Power Europe. So when we're on LinkedIn, we know a little bit about who's saying what. And she says that it's very important to build a stable industrial pipeline to encourage innovation and scaling up of our technologies, which is basically the broad question that we have here today. But what I found interesting in many of the comments that we got is that many of them the EU is already doing. And I don't know if, Vice President, you want to react on some of these existing platforms that exist. What is out there, so that when people ask what is the EU proposing for the EU to do more, maybe you can tell them what already exists before we invent the wheel.
Because I think that if it comes to the solar industry, there have been several challenges over the last years. The first one is that that we came up with this innovation. We started it, and then somehow, due to different factors, we kind of lost that production capacity, and now we are importing most of our panels from China. So I hope that Emma, with her company, will be very successful, and that we will bring something new to the quality of solar panels, and I hope the same for the batteries, that we would be able to demonstrate to the European customers, but also worldwide, that what we are aiming at is actually higher quality of solar panels, higher quality of batteries. Let's call them green panels, green batteries, where we would have much stronger standardization, where we would be very careful about sustainability, about transparency from where we are getting, for example, the raw materials, and how much we are thinking from the moment where we are designing the products about recycling, about recollection of the used material, and about potential reuse of most of the raw materials which are used for these products. So this is something I think what we have to achieve, and where we can clearly distinguish European quality and European approach to sustainability to the products we are importing from abroad. And the second challenge the solar industry was facing in the past was that because of some retroactive changes, they really lost what is so important for investing into the new technologies, and this is investor certainty, investor stability. And therefore we introduce in our new laws, which would guide us through this very important energy transformation, special clause on, if I simplified, and I would call on non-retroactivity. That once you are investing, let's say in solar power, and once the contracts are signed, that they cannot be retroactively changed, because in that case it's very difficult to get our investors into this new technology. So these are a few things which I would mention at this stage, because we need to make sure that the innovators would see the Europe as their primary target market.
And maybe to go back to what Aurélie was saying about how we can help the scaling up, one of the interesting platforms that the EU is involved in is the knowledge and innovation communities, the KICs. So I know that, Damian, you've had experience in InnoEnergy, and Emma, you've been in Climate KIC, sorry. I think that more or less goes in line of the question of how we can actually help, but maybe you can tell us about your experience.
What was your experience?
Yeah, sure. Just to give a bit of context.
First of all, what is KIC? I mean, maybe you can tell our audience what's the...
Well, InnoEnergy is concerned with three strands. There's innovation, business creation, and education. And all those aspects are really important when you want to bring new technologies to the market. And where we were in Ireland, we have a great enterprise board there. We have a lot of data centers, and you think with a solution that can save you 30% energy, you think this is a no-brainer. We just go out and sell it now. The unfortunate thing from our point of view about the data centers in Ireland is that, like Google or Facebook, they're all highly efficient. They don't reflect the average type of data center. So when we talked to them initially, they weren't really interested. And Ireland is, on the western seaboard. Although we have a lot of high-tech companies, we don't really have exposure maybe to a broader market. And I think that's one of the problems for startups. You need to have a value proposition for a customer.
So how did KIC come in and help you?
So what KIC did for us was they're in, we got through the Eindhoven branch, and they exposed us really to the whole of Europe.
So just what is KIC? So this knowledge and innovation community.
Well, they took out.
How did it work? Who is behind?
Well, it's a European project. It's the largest sustainable energy project in Europe. And from our point of view, they invested in our company in terms of cash and also in terms of development, the concept, the ideas, and training. And they also have an annual showcase, which may be in a location like Barcelona or Amsterdam. That brings together all the companies and all the various stakeholders who have an interest in your technology. So it means you're not just talking to a local or a national level of potential clients or customers. You're talking to Europe. And that's what we really need, is we want to talk to Europe. I think most countries tend to look locally or nationally when they're going through their enterprise boards. That's understandable. But really, I think you need to introduce companies into a broader field, and that's what InnoEnergy does. It brings you into a broader field.
And it's worked in your case? I mean,
yeah, it has.
Concretely, how has it influenced your business?
Well, first of all, give us greater clarity about what we need to do, the value proposition, what are the clients. For instance, we were talking to data center managers. Data center managers are mandated just to deliver continuity and security. But we have to move up into the C-level chain to the guys who are paying for the bills. And it's only through exposure, through communication with the market on a broad sense, we were able to ascertain that that really is where our market is. It's not at the lowest level in the hierarchy, it's up the top level. And that's where the decision is made for products like us. So it educates us really about what the market's about.
So if you had to advise or to suggest to the Vice President, you would say that this is something that has worked well for you?
Oh, excellent. Yeah,
Okay.
it's been excellent for us.
We'd like to present them to the innovators community as EU incubators, and I'm glad that, I mean, in your case it works, and energy is one of the most successful one, because I have very positive feedback on what they do, and hopefully more and more innovators will be linked with them and can have the same successful stories as you do.
Juraj, I think you would like the next question or suggestion that we have here. Does anybody speak Spanish? Because it's Jose Cuentas, I think. He is from Barcelona. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce his name. He's an automotive software engineer. And he's suggesting that we draw competitions aimed at inviting companies to overcome certain thresholds or challenges. And the reason I thought you would like it is because I happen to know that you're a finalist in an EU Startup Prize that is going to take place tomorrow. So once again, it's a suggestion that I think I personally like. I hope the Vice President does as well. But I think there are quite a few of them. But maybe you can tell us about the one that you are participating in.
Yeah. I'm very happy that we've been selected out of, I think, a few hundred of companies, and tomorrow is the final round where 10 companies will present, I mean, what they can bring. It's really good that for even smaller startups, in our case, we live already 7-8 years, so we are not that small kind of scale up and so on. But it's as it was mentioned, the valley of the death. It's hard to survive first 3 years. We all know. I mean, after the first 3 years, 90% of the companies or startup will just die. So the first thing is, I mean, you have to be alive, and then you can, I mean, speed up the pace. So the first thing is, I mean, to be there, so we are really happy. I'm also really happy that the e-mobility, which I'm here as a representative of e-mobility, that is taking the pace. I can tell you, back to 2011, we were one of the first companies when we started, even in the Central and Eastern Europe. Everybody was looking at us, oh, come on, guys, why do you I mean, it's really true that you want to do something with the e-mobility world. So imagine that time, first Teslas came to Europe and so on. So that was the time. I'm really happy that the e-mobility is already taking the pace, and there is a lot of things which we have to do here in this place. And I have even one, I think, quite good suggestion what to do.
That's what we're here
hopefully, let's see. When we started back to 2008, there started a lot of subsidies for the solar industry. I was representing that time the industry, and it was really good. And I remember at first it just helps the industry to grow, but right after all these retroactive things came and policies came into place, and that was the reason was just because some of the states, they just thought that it's maybe too much, that the feed-in tariff was too high and so on, and just like shaping maybe wrong direction the industry as such. So that's why there's these kind of things. So maybe to avoid such a situation, when we talk about e-mobility, would be very wise. And what we were thinking, that instead of granting, let's say general lump sum subsidies, let's say, to the EV owners, what if we switch the model for something like pay-as-you-go, something like to EV users? So what if somebody who is really heavily using electric vehicles because he's the one who saves the emissions and whatsoever, and of course he should be also rewarded for that, rather than somebody who is owning a car sitting somewhere in the garage. So the idea is quite simple. Why not to support those users instead of, I mean, holders of the EVs? That's first one for now, maybe. I have a few more later.
At first, to respond to Jose, I think that finally in Europe we also embrace that concept of this awards, inducement prizes. I'm very glad Juraj will participate tomorrow in the final, and good luck for that.
He's going
tomorrow.
to pitch, not only.
Yes. And we are. I think it's on Friday. We're also going to launch another award. This will be done by my colleague responsible for innovation, Carlos Moides, where for the first time we are going to announce the prize for best, greenest, cleanest battery, and it's quite valuable one because there is 10 million euros in it. So we just want to motivate the innovative teams around Europe to enter into this competition and to help us not only to catch up the competition from the EGA, but already to work on the next 4th or 5th generation of the batteries, which would have all these, I would say, European characteristics. And I hope that that would be a motivation for the innovation teams across Europe. And on the subsidies, I think Juraj is right that we have to be very clever how to do that, because actually the solar industry at that time, I remember very well that member states very much wants to use the subsidiarity rule, and they wanted to decide everything by themselves. So some countries really, I mean, the feed-in tariff been overshot. So then during the economic crisis, they felt that they cannot, continue the support because of the financial burden, and it caused a lot of damage to the industry. So here, I think we have to think twice how to do it if we want to have each third car on our roads by 2030, which would have electric element, meaning it will be zero emission or low emission, meaning hybrid car, and how to do it at the same time that it would be like technically not challenging, and that it would be user-friendly and something for which we can convince the member state it's a good idea to implement.
And meanwhile, for José's question, it's not only the Eurovision, there are other tech competitions in Europe that are maybe less popular and well-known, but they are happening around. I'm moving from José from Spain to Markus Lankinen from Finland, who also sent us an interesting proposal, and he's talking about cities, Vice President. I know that it's a topic that you have a passion for, how the EU can work with the local level and how they can lead the energy transition forward. He doesn't go into very specific details on how he thinks that we should do it, but I don't know if you can tell us maybe on your work.
I think that all our partners in this discussion, I think, can share their experience how they projects actually contributing to smartening the cities, because this is again something where I think Europe is leading the world, and therefore we very much support the concept of the smart cities. And when we look what the smart city actually is, at first, of course, you have to be very sustainable in how you run the cities. We want to have the intelligent organization of the transport, and to take care of air pollution, of traffic jams, which are the major headaches for every mayors. And then we also are supporting the technologies which allow better waste management, better water management, and also making sure that the industry in the cities is contributing to the quality of life for the local population. So this is, I would say, the areas where we know to help with our EU budget, with our structural funds, but exactly the projects like it was mentioned here, the very efficient data centers who can share the heat and consume less cooling material, less water, or the solar panels, which would be very modern, and where the administrative buildings or the family households wouldn't hesitate, and they will put it on the roof and use it or for electric vehicle or for batteries to store the energy they can use later. So all this is happening, and therefore we know that mayors are actually very much at the forefront how to embrace these new technologies, because the people are complaining first to them if there is a traffic jam, if there is air pollution. So the mayors are first addressees, and therefore tomorrow what we did was actually we put together the EU Covenant of Mayors. We have more than 6,000 mayors just only from Europe, and 7,500 mayors from all around the world to work on this sustainability agenda. They will be here tomorrow. They will present how they want to make their cities smarter, because each of them had to develop the sustainability plan. And then we are going to bring them together with the industrial and innovative community, just to share the thoughts. This is what we need. This is what you can offer. How can we make this happen? And how can we make the cities maybe the major customers of these new innovative technologies?
So the role of Europe would basically to bring them together, the financial institutions, the cities, and the technologies.
And we are also providing a lot of financing for the cities. We just approved a few days ago a new instrument. It's called Smart Finance for Smart Cities, where we want to bring additional 10 billion euros between now and 2020 for energy efficiency in our cities. So everything which falls under that umbrella, efficient data center, solar panels on the roof, or the e-mobility solution for the cities falls under that financing instrument. And what I hear from the different green bankers in Europe, pension funds and so on, they're ready to invest and finance, but they need good projects. So that would be also the message to the mayors and project promoters tomorrow. If you have a good project, we have mechanism how to help you through the EIB, through national promotional banks, through investment platforms to get it financed.
We have a suggestion exactly on that. We have Ralph Bakker from the Netherlands who are telling us that it seems that banks and multinationals are still very conservative. So he's saying it's not only about finding the finance, it's also convincing them that this new way of doing business is, they don't necessarily buy in. I don't know if you have had experience of how it is to convince the old school bankers to believe and to convey to them the spark in your eyes that this is actually the next best thing. I mean, has it been so difficult?
Yeah. I can tell you, so I was one of those. I was the banker, and after years I switched.
He's converted
so,
now.
Yeah. I was
so
the one
your ex-colleagues, if you went...
that was real case.
If the new UI went to the old UI and asked for a loan, would you get one?
Exactly. That was the case that time, a few years ago, when we started with the solar industry. Yeah, it's true, and I think the times are... getting better, but still you have to have a real good business case, and you have to have it. The pitch is just one thing, but you cannot persuade. Without the numbers, without the budget, without the plan, and without the real, let's say, the content. The marketing is really good stuff around it, but the content should be really good, and you have to also understand what the bankers are expecting from you. If you want to, have a loan which is, let's say, 10 times bigger than what are your assets. So I can understand that for a typical, for the banker, that's a problem. But on the other hand, we know and we hear it more and more often that because of the low, let's say, margins now in the banks, they are pushed to come up with a new projects because they understand that somewhere there might be a new Google, might be a new, let's say, Microsoft or whoever, even Apple. So they, on one hand, they love to invest in such companies in later stage. This is typically the case. In a very early stage, typically that's the case that somebody has to help. So typically first stage, friends and family stage, then you go after you have something, angel investor, then maybe.
So if you don't have the right friends or the right family, you might be in trouble.
Okay.
So I don't think really bankers really for early stage until you're post-revenue. Going to a bank, certainly now the experience is they just don't want to know. Particularly when it's just IP, there's no security. In my case, you have to go personally, as a security or guarantor for the loan. And this is one of the issues, like, how do you get your product forward? Peter Thiel, who's one of the greatest serial entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, he's been on many projects with Elon Musk. He said that most innovative technologies are the ones in which the inventor or the entrepreneur has a secret that no one else acknowledges. So it's like Ryanair was the first Irish company that said you could have budget travel. Everyone else said it's impossible to have budget travel. Elon Musk said you could have reusable rockets. Everyone believed him last week. So when you're an entrepreneur, and when you're really innovative, you need to develop case studies. You need to prove your technology, and that's very difficult to do. First of all, people don't believe you. They haven't got time to deal with prototypes. So that's the only way you can go forward, is to prove the technology. And that's where I think the EU can come in. I said through networking, so that you're not just looking at your national or local environment for a client or a customer who needs your solution. The solution is going out, and it's rather like in a sea of ideas and opportunities. It's floating around there. Maybe the solution is over in France, not in Ireland. You know, someone's looking for your problem. So you need to disseminate your problem through a portal, maybe an online portal that's European, so that others can see the opportunity that's there and take it on board and try it and become the early adopters. Once you've got an early adopter, then you can take it to the next stage. So really, that is really, I think, the valley of death for a lot of startups. Great ideas, but just trying to find where the customer is, where's the value proposition. Once you've done that, then you can go to the next stage.
And maybe to add to this, I think we, in this commission, we started with the new instrument, which was aimed exactly at the risking this initial investment under the name of the Juncker Investment Fund, because what we clearly felt when we started 3 years ago was that Europe is heavily under-invested, and that still our investment levels being in the pre-crisis levels. And just to restart the normal investment cultures, we decided to create this the risking fund, which we are managing through the EIB, which more or less says if you invest in this project, in this technology, first eventual losses are upon us. And it opened, I would say, a lot of opportunities. So far, we invested through this fund 260 billion euros, so it's quite a lot of money. That was quite a big success of the first 3 years. So we decided to have a 500 billion fund until 2020. So there is this possibility, but I think it would be very interesting to hear also from our audience, from the LinkedIn who tried it, who has the personal experience with it, because a lot of projects has been funded like this, but to be quite honest, most of them in infrastructure, a lot of them in energy efficiency. I know that quite a few of them in the innovation, and this is exactly the segment which we would like to enlarge. It would be easier for the startup community. It would be easier for the smaller innovators to get the riskier funding through these de-risking instruments, because I understand also the bankers, they would like to have some backup if something goes wrong. Yeah.
So Alf, if you're watching us and if you've had any experience of that kind and you want to leave us a comment, we'll be very happy. And maybe it's an opportunity also to, if you're joining us now, to remind you, we're broadcasting live. We have the Vice President of the European Commission, Maroš Šefčovič, and 3 startupists, and we are collecting your ideas on what the EU can do more on top to promote clean tech in Europe. From what we've gathered and discussed so far, I think that part of this exercise is maybe to let the people, your community on LinkedIn know that so much is happening already, because I have a feeling that many of the proposals, the answer is, but we are. But I think there have been a few already, and maybe we will summarize in a few minutes. But I wanted to, there's an interesting question that actually came, or suggestion in the House from an employee of the Commission named Margarita Gaze, and she says that she knows that you've been to some of the intensive coal regions, and that she's curious what was the reaction there to this kind of rhetoric, this kind of narrative that we're discussing here. Is it the younger, the older people who were more sensitive to this topic? How does it resonate with them? Because we are discussing here among entrepreneurs, politicians, but how does it trickle to some of the regions that are, you know, on the other side of this transition?
I think such a, I would say, strongest emotion I felt when I was in Silesia, which is very strong mining region in Poland. And I went to present this idea that we from the European level, together with the national and local levels, should try to develop new business models, new economic future for the regions which go through this very difficult transition. And of course, the coal miners are very proud people, so I was not sure what kind of reaction I will receive when I was presenting this case. And the result was that the speaker of the regional parliament told me, yes, we want to work with you, because I'm afraid that the younger people will continue to leave my cities, that they wouldn't like to live in this region because they're afraid that they will not get a good job, that their kids would suffer from respiratory diseases, and that simply this beautiful region of ours will not have the economic future. So work with us. Let's look for the new opportunities. Let's work on the new platforms, and let's give also this coal mining community new economic future, new business opportunities. This is exactly what we are trying to do. So I have to say that also the mindset is shifting, because especially the young generation, the millennials, are extremely sensitive about the environment, about air pollution, about the future of our planet. And I think also the local politicians feel it. And we have to combine this enthusiasm of the millennials with the responsibility for social consequences of this transformation, to make sure that the transition is fair, that we would not leave anybody behind, and we would offer new solutions, and we have them. We have the technology, we have the funds, we just need to have the common approach how to solve this very sensitive problem.
So Margaret, if you're watching us, I think the Vice President sounds optimistic to me. I think we can, there's a hopeful future, and that actually connects very well with the next question that came up, which I also like, from Victoria Dome. She's a consultant in Singapore at the Sustainable and Economic Development Collaboratory, but she's worked, I looked at her profile, in Scotland, in Slovakia, so I'm not exactly sure. Tell us where you're from. It sounds, my colleagues tell me that your name is Hungarian, and she's asking on how to reach behavioral change among consumers. So you just spoke about it among millennials. I don't know if you want to talk. You come from Sweden and you're a millennial. I mean,
how to change the behavior of customers.
Among your friends who are not entrepreneurs at the age of 5, those who have more of a normal youth, I mean, is it something that they're preoccupied with? Do they wake up in the morning and ask themselves, how can we...
Yes, I would say definitely, especially when it comes to food. A lot of them are questioning our ways of eating meat, and most of them buy ecological, even though it's more expensive. And everyone wants to buy my solar cells, which is great. But I would say they're thinking about it on a day-to-day basis, most of them. I'm not sure if they would change some of their behaviors, though.
But do you feel like it's a Swedish thing or a generational thing?
I would say generation thing. I mean, my friends in the US or my friends in the rest of Europe, same.
So when you travel, Vice President...
children in the age of Emma, so I can confirm it definitely. I can definitely confirm. I think that in this case, I mean, two words come to mind. And first is monetization, and second is screenification. That's a word I learned from talking to millennials. I mean, and I will use the example of former Minister of Environment, Ségolène Royal from France, because she was very much insisting that the social housing should be energy efficient, and they tested different technologies. And one of the technology was that in these apartments, so there was a screen, therefore screenification, which said how much you pay for the use of energy, for cooking, heating, but what was especially telling in the case of millennial, for long showers. And then the mom could tell, you know, we've been there for 45 minutes, it costs you 25 euros or something similar, and that somehow was changing the behavior. So that's a little bit that people like to see, that when they behave, that how much energy they save, how it is translated into the money, and there are even some kind of competitions within the communities among the houses. But you need to be able to measure it, to have a smart technology, to show it on the screen, and that actually brings the new behavioral pattern.
And you know, Vice President, before you went to the One Planet Summit in Paris, we had the millennials here in the studio, and they pitched ideas to you how to involve youth. And I remember that one of the interesting ideas was to develop an app that millennials could actually look every day how much CO2 emissions I generated. I think many of us would be afraid to see the answer, but yeah, there seems to be demand, and this idea is kind of recurrent now.
Yeah, we would be surprised, I think, by then.
So maybe you're serial entrepreneurs, if you ever want to come up with an app.
I think there's several apps like that.
Also, this comes to branding. And I think it's one thing that when you're a startup, you don't tend to think of a brand. You tend to think of just a problem and a solution. And we were in that, unfortunately, we were in that category. And we were talking to companies, and then we realized that because of millennials, people are, companies are more aware that they have to be corporate, socially responsible, and have a green agenda. So it's not a case they just have to do business, have to be seen that they're doing something about the environment. So we were actually to tag on to that. Instead of just saying we do energy management, performance management, we've actually built a campaign around that concept. And so when companies buy our technology now, they can go onto our website and show what carbon they're saving. And this is to the public. So it does two things. For us, it shows our technology works. If it also shows that they're doing something about it, they're buying into the agenda.
Right.
So I think startups, usually tend to postpone branding to the end and think about what type of brand we are. We were in that category. But if you take it early on and look at it in the bigger context, you bring in the millennials, bring in a wider population who can see that your brand is part of the sustainability agenda in Europe. And we've worked on that, and we even have a campaign now where we're going to save 1 million tons in Europe. And
so that's from your perspective as entrepreneurs, but to go back maybe to the purpose of the exercise, what would you expect the EU to do in order to create this kind of change of mindset, encourage millennials? I mean, from what I hear from what you're saying, this is happening anyway, but if you were the vice president?
I wouldn't.
How can we influence people to think in a more sustainable way?
I think you have to show that first of all, you have to educate, you have to tell people, not tell people, that's the wrong word to say. I think you have to highlight the benefits and the success stories, and that's through case studies, and show that it's not just the business that is gaining. We are a society gaining on a number of fronts: environmental, economic, social, all those aspects, and communicate with the community. And the community is your business space. It's not just the end customer. It's a wider space than that. So I think that has to be done in a number of ways, through through social networking, through publications. Generally speaking, use all the facilities that we now have in the modern era to highlight what can be achieved and what is being achieved.
Okay, there's an interesting suggestion that I would think would interest the two Slovaks around the table, not because you're Slovaks, but you'll understand in a moment. Samuele Larzeni. Everything sounds better in Italian, I don't know why. He's from the Italian Authority for Energy Networks and Environment. And he's suggesting, he is very sensitive to the question of electrification of transport and heating, and he says, why aren't there EU standards across these kind of technologies? Particularly, he gives as an example plugs for electric vehicles, so that cars can drive across Europe and use the same plug to charge. So,
yeah, I think it's true that when you start with something new like the e-cars, so you have different competing technologies. But now I think if it comes to the plug, so the EU standards is already agreed. It's so-called Type 2 plug, which should be really used as an EU standard all across the Europe. So there will be smooth driving across the EU. At the same time, I have to say that we have also cars like Tesla. They prefer still to have their own charging system. So, but we are working on that as well. That Type 2 would be perceived as a European standard. And at the same time, what I think it's very important for this particular segment of the business is that we need something like the roaming of charging. So we call it
charging.
Yes, we actually call it e-roaming, meaning that because if and I'm sure that Juraj can explain it better than I do. So if you want to charge the car today, so you have to have a card which you use for charging your car. So what I think we have to achieve is that so when you cross the borders and go to another country, so you can use the same card and you can charge your car. And we also need the intelligent charging stations, meaning that when you look at your navigation, that you would get that information where is the closest charging station. Of course, in your country, but also I mean our people would like to drive all across Europe. So I think we need this compatibility not only on plugs but also on these charging cards, and also on the signal this charging station would send out, so anyone who needs charging would easily find them. Yeah.
Okay. So Samuele, it's being taken care of. Don't worry.
Not yet, but we are working on it.
Okay.
I mean, Type 2 is a great. We just need these 800,000 stations, charging stations across Europe. We have 200,000 of them. So
I think we need clearly say we're going from free movement in Europe to free e-movement in Europe. So you can go wherever you want with your electric car.
Juraj, I don't know what is your experience with this standardization.
What I wanted to add, that's true. I mean, it's much more than that. In China, they have a different standard. In the US, a different standard. Tesla has a different standard, and of course. The first standard, CHAdeMO, which came from Japan, is still part of the Europe because of the France Alliance and so on. And of course, we know that the Type 2 will be the case for EU. So, I mean, the direction is kind of given, but still take the example of the cell phone. So if you have a Samsung, Apple, and so on, so there is a lot of, I mean, you have to have your own cable, otherwise sometimes you are.
If I remember correctly, there are already standardized European standards for chargers.
For USB, yes, but not for the other part of the cable. And that's actually the thing also with the electric cars. So I think this is one thing. The other thing, what was mentioned regarding the roaming, I think that's something. Imagine the situation again from the telecom industry. Today I was flying and the operators were changing in my phone automatically. So the future of the traveling with the e-car is that you will have one card and the operators will allow you to charge wherever you go with the one card. That's already, I mean, the standard which is
from the revolution of free roaming for phones to a revolution of free roaming.
Definitely.
Do we have such cards already? It works somewhere?
Yeah, I think already on a, let's say, national level you can do like that. And we, as I mentioned, 3 startups. One of those is the Greenway, the company which we are running in Central and Eastern Europe, doing actually this this part of the job. And yes, we have customers which they go abroad and they use their card, and yeah, it's evolving, and that's, I mean, given direction.
Okay, we're nearing the end, so I'd like to ask each of you if you want to add still something, a last suggestion that you have not had the chance to bring to the Vice President, before I ask the Vice President to kind of conclude the main ideas that he collected from today. Maybe. Yeah, if you'd like to start.
Well, first of all, I wish to say, you know, what we have in Europe in terms of programs really is, you know, extensive. And that's maybe one of the aspects that's its downside is there's so many opportunities, so many programs. For a startup, it's hard to navigate through all of them. So if there's a simplification how you can get into the system. Things that are also really good, I mean, energy would be an example of this, is that the incubation period for projects that are proposed to funding can be very short, sometimes can be very long. For instance, Horizon 2020, we went into 2 Horizon 2020 programs and took 18 months between submission and finally getting a rejection. For a startup, that's just really too long. Yeah. It may not be around for the rejection. So I think having a shorter assessment period, like Inner Energy was only 3 months, and we went through 2 stringent processes in terms of the company and the technology, and we got a decision pretty quick, and that was really to our advantage, and we just basically proceed onwards. So keep things short, sharp, and just keep doing what the Commission is doing already, and bring all those ideas in, because there's some great ideas out there, and we want to see them.
Money, and for you, it's even more critical money.
Yeah. So there's great ideas out there, because I'm talking to our students in UCD, University College Dublin. Loads of them have great sustainable ideas. Some of them, I'm sure, will come into the arena in years to come. They just want to know how to get into the programs and do it with a minimum amount of bureaucracy. If you can.
Do you also have advice, maybe, as we're doing this last round, for startupists, other startupists who are watching us and would like, is there one thing that you would like to leave them as a tip? You can think about it another second if you'd like.
I'll have to think about that one. Yeah.
And Emma?
Maybe on the same subject, these big EU grants that you can get is really great, especially for a company like us that's very R&D heavy and need a lot of money to reach the market. But they're really hard, like administratively, and like everyone I know that got them used a consultant that like specifically focus on writing, and they take like 10% of the grant, which feels like waste. And a suggestion I have is that maybe you could use, because like Dan said, I'm part of Climate Kick. It's a great program. It's an accelerated program for clean tech startups within the EU. And I would say maybe it's more of a community, a network, rather than a program. Because you get to know, not only, like I have a Swedish business coach, but I also get to know like the contact point in Norway and Denmark and Spain, very good. And I mean, we're in the program for like 1.5 years, so these business coaches know us very, very well. And they know our startups very well, and like how our go-to-market strategy. So maybe it would be easier to channel some of the money, like in the through Climate Kick or in energy, or I mean, program that you already have in place that is really good and helping a lot of the startups we get some money, but it's very small compared to the big grants.
You managed to answer both my questions with one answer. You proposed to the Vice President, you gave an advice to startupists who are watching us on what they can do. I'm telling you, the future is millennials.
Absolutely.
I don't know if I can consider myself still one, but it's...
conspiracy going on here, a very positive one.
You just told me I was, so now I'm happy. Juraj, last word from you.
I have, let's say, a few more ideas regarding e-mobility. I'll try. More and more often now, it will be chance to have a second life of the batteries in reality, because first generation of the cars will actually will be old, 5, 7, some of those 10 years old. So more and more often we will have an issue with the recycling of the batteries, and there is a clear, let's say, political strategy to go for a second life of the batteries and to use it for a more grid stability. Mm-hmm. This is a very nice idea, and we are very happy that this is here. But on the other hand, that's not the case for the regulation. Mm-hmm. I mean, the regulation is not prepared for somebody who will be, however, and not even, on the other hand, it should be even like supported for such a behavior that you are putting something on the grid and creation kind of stability with your, let's say, battery, even if you are an entrepreneur or something like this, storage system whatsoever. Mm-hmm. So this kind of regulation is completely, unfortunately, still missing.
Okay. Very good. Vice President, we put you in a difficult position. We threw so much ideas and information at you from the studio, from your LinkedIn community. So now maybe some final word from you on what you think how will this feed you for your next 2 days when you're going to the forum? Do you feel like you are better?
I took a lot of notes.
Yeah, I can see that.
And
are you better equipped now?
Yeah, I'm definitely better equipped for tomorrow's discussion. And maybe I will start from the last suggestion, because I think I have a good news for Juraj, that if it comes to the storing of energy, we are just finalizing, meaning that we just need to get approval from the European Parliament and the member state, the agreement on the new electricity market design. And I often say that what we propose there is the deepest transformation of our energy system since they've been built in Europe 150 years ago and put on fossil basis. Because what we are proposing there is digitization of the grids. It's demand-side management. It's a reward for ability to store the energy. And in this case, we feel that e-mobility and batteries are such a crucial next big thing, because with all that capacity of batteries which we would need in Europe, because we expect that by 2025 it would be already the market of 250 billion euros annually. So we definitely want to use the capacity of storing the energy of those batteries for balancing our electricity grids and cover for that intermittency of renewables like solar and wind. So it will be done. I'm sure that the next decade will start under the new management, new framework, and new electricity market design, which would support these new technologies. Of course, for that we need the standardization of batteries as well. We need two-way batteries, not only the batteries which can take the energy, but also the batteries which can sell it back to the grid. And I personally like the idea that if you have an electric car, that it can actually earn you some money, because they can sell the energy back into the transmission system when the energy is very expensive, when the car is idling in the garage, for example. And I totally take the point from Emma and from Professor on simplification of our grants. I get it a lot, and I'm very often as a EU commissioner sorry to hear that that the people prefer to go to the bank than to apply for EU grants, because they're simply too administratively burdensome and complicated. And I agree with them that if we have the EU budget money, they should go for the project support and not for consultants who can prepare this project. So we are trying to simplify. We are in the midst of preparation of the next 7 years budget. We want, if possible, and if member states would work with us, to double the money for research and innovation, and to have more flexible financial instruments which would be easier to administer and which also would be in such a mode that they could be blended with other investments coming from national or private sector. But what I think we would need now and in the future is something what we have set up for our mayors. It's advisory hub for innovators, for startup community, that you would have a number, you would have an email address where you can get an advice. I have such a project. What is the best addressee? Who can give me the advice? What grant, what program, what investment tool would be the best for promoting my idea? So we would not lose the time with consultants or going through the different programs we have in the EU to find the right one for you. So that's something what we definitely have to pick up, and I hope that we can really start to work on it, because I know that my colleague Carlos Moedas, who is responsible for this 80 billion of Horizon 2020, gets the same feedback as I get from the innovation communities in Europe. And I think it would definitely help us with creating more type of a business angel investment. This is what I really feel we are missing, and therefore we are losing a lot of innovators to Silicon Valley or to China, because there it's easier to get funding for the good new ideas. And from other suggestions which been made, I very much like the idea of this green branding and early on, because this is something where Europe is different from the rest of the world, and I think that should be our European brand. And if something coming from Europe, it's high tech, it's clean tech, it's green, it's sustainable, and it's of high quality. And I think this is what we should try to incorporate in all our products, be the cars, be the batteries, be the data centers, because this is what the people in Europe, but I'm sure increasingly across the globe, would appreciate more and more. And then I have some more ideas here, which I will say for the community of investors in industrialists tomorrow. So really thank you very much for the contributions, and also to our colleagues on the LinkedIn community, because I saw that
it keeps.
They're coming to my watch, and I see that.
You get the notifications.
So I'm getting permanent.
I was wondering why.
You're not looking at the time.
Right.
So I mean, I saw that there was quite a traffic with a good idea.
Keep on vibrating the hand of the Vice President. You're doing a good job. On that note, I'd like to thank you, Vice President, for taking the time, for hosting us on your LinkedIn page. I'd like to thank the three of you, Damian, Emma, and Juraj, for joining us here today. And I'd like to thank you, viewers on YouTube, on LinkedIn, for taking the time, for taking part in this fascinating discussion. I think we just created LinkedIn Live together for the first time. From us here in Brussels, thank you, and see you next time.
Thank you.